are you? I love books. I love good stories, and I love sharing them with you. And I have a good one today. It is called Mr. Peabody's Apples. It is by Madonna, and the illustration art is by Lauren Long. You can see it is beautiful, beautiful artwork. A town during the day. Mr. Peabody's Apples. That's Mr. Peabody, and that is Billy Little. Okay. And the water tower says, "Welcome to Hapville." And I don't know if you can see, but this is an apple tree. And down there in the field, looks like some people are playing baseball. Ah, and here's a close-up of a very active baseball game. Okay. In the town of Hapville, which wasn't a very big town, Mr. Peabody was congratulating his Little League team on a great game. They had not won, but no one really cared because they had such a good time playing. Mr. Peabody was the history teacher at the local elementary school, and in the summertime, he dedicated every Saturday to organizing baseball games with other schools. Billy Little, who wasn't a very big boy, was one of Mr. Peabody's students. He loved baseball more than anything, and he thought Mr. Peabody was the greatest. After each game, he would always stay to help pick up all the bats and balls. And when they were finished, Mr. Peabody would smile and say, "Thanks, Billy. Good job. I'll see you next Saturday." This says, Mr. Peabody congratulates his Little League team on a great game. Then he would walk home along the main street of Hapville, which wasn't a very big street, waving hello to everyone he knew, and everyone would wave back. Along the way, he always passed Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Here, Mr. Peabody would stop and admire Mr. Funkadeli's fresh apples. He would pick out the shiniest apple, drop it in his bag, and continue on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom watched with curiosity as Mr. Peabody walked away with the apple. "That's strange," Tommy said to himself. "Mr. Peabody didn't pay for the apple." Tommy got on his skateboard and rushed to tell all his friends. It says, "Mr. Peabody picks the shiniest apple." The following Saturday, Mr. Peabody's team played another game. They lost, as usual, but no one seemed to care because they had such a good time playing. Billy picked up all the balls and bats, and Mr. Peabody set off on his walk home. He waved to everyone he knew, and they waved back. Once again, he stopped outside Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market, picked up the shiniest apple, dropped it in his bag, and continued on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends watched Mr. Peabody, and they were amazed at what they saw. Mr. Peabody had not paid for the apple. They couldn't wait to tell all their friends, who told their parents, who told their neighbors, who told their friends, in the town of Hapville, which wasn't a very big town. This says, Tommy and his friends are amazed by what they see. The Saturday after that, Mr. Peabody was standing alone on the baseball field, wondering where everybody was. Then he saw Billy walking towards him with a sad look on his face. "Hello, Billy. I'm glad you're here, but where's the rest of the team?" asked Mr. Peabody. Billy remained silent. "What is it, Billy?" he asked again. Billy didn't look up. "Everybody thinks you're a thief," he said to the ground. Mr. Peabody looked confused. He took off his hat and scratched his head. "Who says I'm a thief, Billy? And what did I steal?" he asked. "Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends said they saw you take an apple from Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market twice, and they said you didn't pay for them," answered Billy. "Ah," said Mr. Peabody, putting his hat back on his head. "Let's go and talk to Mr. Funkadeli about it, shall we?" There's a sad Billy. And this says, Mr. Peabody wonders where everybody is. "Everybody thinks you're a thief." They walked down the main street, which wasn't a very big street, and Mr. Peabody waved to all the people he knew, but now some of them didn't wave back, and some pretended they didn't even see him. They finally arrived at Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Out popped Mr. Funkadeli, who said, "Hey, what are you doing here, Mr. Peabody? Why aren't you at the game?" "There wasn't a game today," said Mr. Peabody, "and I was wondering if I could take my apple earlier than usual." "Sure, why not?" replied Mr. Funkadeli. "You pay for them every Saturday morning when you pick up your milk. You can take them when you like. You want the big shiny one, Mr. Peabody?" Mr. Peabody took the apple, smiled, and offered it to Billy. "I would like to take the apple, Mr. Peabody, but I have to go find Tommy and explain everything," said Billy. "When you find him, ask him to come over to my house. I would like to speak to him too," replied Mr. Peabody. He says, Mr. Peabody offers Billy the apple. A little while later, Billy found Tommy and told him what had happened with the apples. He told Tommy that Mr. Peabody wanted to speak to him right away. So off Tommy ran, and when he arrived, he rang the doorbell, and Mr. Peabody came to the door. They looked at each other for a while. "Oh dear, Mr. Peabody," said Tommy on the doorstep. "I didn't understand. I should not have said what I said, but it looked like you hadn't paid for the apple." Mr. Peabody's eyebrows went up a little, and he felt a warm breeze blow across his face. "It doesn't matter what it looked like. What matters is the truth." Tommy looked down at his shoes and said, "I'm so sorry. What can I do to make things better now?" Mr. Peabody took a deep breath, looked up at a small cloud that was in the sky, and said, "I'll tell you what, Tommy. Meet me at the baseball diamond in 1 hour and bring a pillow stuffed with feathers." "Okay," said Tommy, who then ran off to his house to get a pillow. It says, Tommy rings Mr. Peabody's doorbell. An hour later, Tommy met Mr. Peabody on the pitcher's mound. "Hello, Tommy," said Mr. Peabody. "Follow me and bring your pillow." Tommy followed Mr. Peabody to the top of the bleachers, wondering what that was all about. "It's a windy day, isn't it?" asked Mr. Peabody when they reached the top. Tommy nodded in agreement. "Here is a pair of scissors. Now cut the pillow in half and shake the feathers out." Tommy looked confused, but he did it anyway. He thought it was a small price to pay to gain Mr. Peabody's forgiveness. The wind carried the thousands of feathers far and wide. It says Tommy meets Mr. Peabody on the pitcher's mound. And here is the wind carrying the thousands of feathers far and wide. It's a lot of feathers. Tommy looked relieved and said, "Is that all I have to do to make things better?" "There's one more thing," said Mr. Peabody. "Now you must go and pick up the feathers." Tommy frowned. "I don't think it's possible to pick up the feathers." Tommy replied, "It would be just as impossible to undo the damage you have done by spreading the rumor that I am a thief," said Mr. Peabody. "Each feather represents a person in Hapville." It says, each person represents a feather in Hapville. There was a long pause as Tommy began to understand what Mr. Peabody was saying. Finally, he said, "I guess I have a lot of work ahead of me." Mr. Peabody smiled and said, "Indeed you do. Next time, don't be so quick to judge a person, and remember the power of your words." Then he handed Tommy the shiny red apple and made his way home. It says, Mr. Peabody makes his way home. And here is a picture of someone's bedroom. I wonder who you think it is, with a sewn up pillow and some feathers blowing in. Looks like there's a game of catch out in the yard. The end. There is the dark town at the end of the day. And there is a note at the back of the book from the author. And it says, "Dedicated to teachers everywhere. This book was inspired by a nearly 300-year-old story that was told to me by my Kabbalah teacher. It stayed with me for a long time, and when I began to write books for children, I decided to share the essence of this story in one of them. It is about the power of words and how we must choose them carefully to avoid causing harm to others." The Baal Shem Tov, master of the good name, who was the author of the original story, was also a great teacher. He was born around 1700 in Podolia, a region of the Ukraine, and dedicated his life to teaching and helping others. He believed that practicing religion out of habit is a pointless endeavor and advocated instead an understanding of why we practice spirituality. Among his many teachings, he stressed the value and importance of love for all people. I hope that I have done his story justice. Madonna. And that is the story of Mr. Peabody's apples. I hope you liked it too. Have a good day.